Yo and hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the League of Fantasy Legends podcast. We're going to look back at week 4, what was an exciting week, and then preview week 5. If you guys haven't, follow us on Twitter, join our weekly challenge. We'll give you those links in a second, but first I want to welcome another guest to the podcast, the second ever. This man, if it wasn't for him, this podcast would not exist, because he is the man who introduced me to League of Legends back in 2015. I don't know whether to thank him or to yell at him. Regardless, welcome Shawken to the podcast. What's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about inviting you to come join as well, because it's caused me to eat up a lot more of my time than it should have. So, but yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely, my OG duo. I'll never forget early on when we were playing, I didn't know anything from anything. You played a full AP Blitzcrank game, and you went like 25-0, and I was pretty much hooked. It was insane. Do you remember that game?
I don't know if it was the first or the second game we played together, because I remember forcing you to play Ashe, and all I basically told you was to hit your R button and just pray that you hit someone, because then I could hook and explode them. So I don't know if that was the exact same game, but I know that we played a few that day, and I for sure made you play Ashe for my own
That's
benefit.
right. I think Ashe was my first champion. I think Anivia was my second, and then I never left. That's still the only champion I play.
Yeah, Freljord, I guess all about those ice champions. Lissandra sounds like it might be the next one for you to go for.
There we go. Hey, it's meta right now, too. Hey, should we call you Shawken? Is that good?
Yeah, I guess I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kenton Shawken Shaw. It's very original. Shawken works totally fine. We know each other in real life as well, so if I call you Chris and you call me Kenton, that's totally fine as well.
Hey, Fantasy LCS, obviously the name of the show. How long have you been playing?
Fantasy LCS? Yeah, I've only been in it since Spring Split of this year, so what is that? Split and a half?
Yeah.
So not very long.
You got me into League, I got you into Fantasy LCS, so kind of repaying the favor, I suppose. Are you also a fantasy football guy too, other fantasy sports?
Yeah, I mostly just do fantasy football. The other fantasy sports I have a harder time getting into. I like the ones that you kind of get to set it for the weekend, and that's about it. So basketball and hockey and baseball are all a little bit outside the realm of how much time I want to invest.
I did a fantasy hockey league in college. I actually really enjoyed it, but never got back to it. I don't really know why. Do you have a favorite team?
Yeah. Actually, I do not. I've always been a fan of specific players. My number one player has luckily still been in the league, Aframu.
Yep.
And I've pretty much been a fan of whatever team he's been on. So for a long time, I was a fan of CLG. That was OG CLG days. And then I believe he went to Hundred Thieves for a little while, because I know I was a Hundred Thieves fan. So I assume it's because Aframu was on that team. Yeah, right
when they started. I think he was their main guy.
Yeah, I think so. And then obviously he's now on Flyquest, so I'm pseudo Flyquest fan, but I guess it's just all the people that roll swaps to support, because I'm been a huge fan of Huhi since he switched from mid lane, and I'm actually becoming a bigger fan of Sven now that he's in the support role. So I guess it's just support role, people that came from another role.
You have a type, it's alright. I like Freljord. You like mid laners turned supports, that's fine.
Well, ADCs, because that's Sven and Aframu, right?
Alright, so I don't mean to talk crap, but I have noticed that in our main league, your fantasy team is 0-8. So I just have to bring it up. Like, dude, what went wrong?
You know, in a lot of fantasy sports, the draft is not everything. And so you get to prepare for it, you get to have a good time at the draft, and then there's a lot of free agency type things. As you and I both know now, that is not necessarily the case for Fantasy LCS. Whoever you end up with is basically who you have. And my draft did not go very well. I first picked a closer who is not as good as he was last split, and I had him in Someday combo last split, and so I was really happy to pick him up, but they haven't been doing as well as I thought. And then back-to-back rounds 2 and 3, man. Round 2, I had my eyes on Jojo Pyun. He was coming back, drafted right in front of me, so I went with Takui, which is still a good pick.
Yeah.
But Yeah, it was really the next round when Berserker was coming back around. And there was only one guy in front of me that didn't have an ADC, and wouldn't you know it, he drafted Berserker, and I dropped a Tactical, which is no longer on my team, as well as my 4th pick, Ignar, who's no longer on my team, and my 5th pick, Gamsu, who's no longer on my team.
That's a tough stretch.
So,
the tough part is if you would have kept Tactical, you could have gotten the Instinct Pentakill this weekend, but I doubt you did. There's no way.
Yeah, no, I did not have the Instinct Pentakill this week. In fact, I don't even think I had Tactical last week.
So you're in our Dynasty League. So we talked about a bit of the Dynasty League last week. We finally got that started in between since last week's episode. We had our draft. What do you think about your team? Now, do you really follow the LEC?
In times where I have more time, yes. Like, when the wife's out of town and it's a Friday morning and I don't have a whole lot going on, yeah, I'll watch some LEC games, but I am not an avid follower of the LEC, so it did come a little difficult to do that draft because I think you talked about it last week, but it's a combination of LEC and LCS players, so it made for a difficult draft, but I felt like my draft ended up fairly good. I actually did end up with Jojo Pion in this league. I ended up with Hansama and Comp. I don't even know what team Comp is for, to be perfectly honest.
So he's on Rogue. I think he had a crazy good week last week, too.
He did, and unfortunately I started Hansama. And we actually went up against each other, and that swap alone would have been enough to take me from the loss to the win.
Too bad, man. Too bad.
Yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. But yes, I tried to keep a good, healthy mix of LEC and LCS players because once you get outside those top teams in LCS, it's kind of a crapshoot who's going to have a good week. And so I tried to pick some what I thought were top players in the LEC, but man, looks like after 1 week, I'm kind of worried about my jungle position.
Yeah, it looks like you have Razork in the jungle. Fnatic had a rough week. G2 also had a rough week. I'm seeing Broken Blade in the top lane. They struggled too.
Yeah, I actually heard earlier today that G2's 4-5, which makes me worried about that Broken Blade
pick. I took
pick.
the 3rd overall pick, so I took him after, I believe Danny and Upset were 1-2, so I took Caps 3, and he wasn't that good, but good enough to get the win, I suppose. We'll go ahead and get right into the episode part of it. So I want to talk about just a couple champions. We'll go down a little list here. I just want to get your take on whether you like the pick, whether you don't like it, kind of what your thoughts are. We'll start with Corki. I think everyone knows my thoughts. I've made it very clear. What do you think?
My thoughts are pretty much in line with yours. It's a strong pick. It's not a bad pick for Fantasy LCS because you don't die a lot and you just poke from range. So you get a lot of kills and assists, but as far as a fan and watching, no thank you.
I don't
Get
even
Corki out of
mind
here.
old Corki, right? Like Marksman Corki is, it's boring because it's so safe in lane, but this version where you build a Ludens and just poke from the other side of the map, 2-shotting carries, it's totally right. Kalista.
I think opposite. I think it's really fun to watch because it's hyper aggro. You have to be in close range. She does not have very much range, so picks like Corki just kind of destroy her. But I think it's just a terrible pick for the LCS and for Fantasy LCS because the LCS is just not the league where they're steamrolling people unless you're at the top facing a bottom opponent. And so you end up getting to the mid to late game, and Kalista just seems like another minion running around unless they just happen to have a good team fight. And I think one of her biggest strengths is objective control. You can do the Rend Smite combo, and it's amazing how few objectives the Kalista teams get. Like that is her biggest strength, and I've just not been a fan.
At the beginning of the split, I was seeing that Kalista was meta in other leagues, and my prediction was that it would not be popular here for the exact reasons you said. And I was wrong. It's actually been a fairly popular pick. So I agree. It just seems like one of those picks that the players really like to play.
Yeah, I'm not a good League of Legends player, but even I enjoy playing Kalista from time to time. It is fun, but there are pop-off games. You have, I think Tactical had a really good game on Kalista, like week 1 or 2. There's a couple this past weekend, but it's got to have a losing overall percentage. And maybe scrims are something different, but I just do not like.
I think it was
Kalista pick.
TSM got the win against Team Liquid early on with the Kalista Renata combo. Yeah, okay, one more. What do you think about the Sejuani pick?
Man, the Corki and the Kalista, I said they were kind of opposites. I think Sejuani is, outside of I believe it was Ole that played it in support. Outside of that, I honestly think it's just trash tier. It's boring to watch, and it has no agency in lane, and they're typically, all they're good for is their R. And you're with players who are good at hitting that, but it's just, I have not been a fan of Sejuani top.
I played against the Sejuani top in solo queue, and it killed me a bunch of times, so I understand it, especially if you've got like a melee jungler, melee mid laner that can stack up that stun, but it's been underwhelming. It seems like it needs to be a lane dominant champion, hence it always taking like TP Ignite, but when you're against a Gangplank, like you're not going to kill the Gangplank. So yeah, I agree, it's been pretty underwhelming, especially when people have tried to blind pick it.
Yeah, I've been really confused by the TP Ignite, because it just never seems to have any lane prio, so when are you ever going to use the Ignite offensively? And I get the theory of it, right? Sedge has a dash, so you don't necessarily need the flash, but
you do.
There's so many other options. If you're not going to do anything, till the team fight, get like Exhaust or something. Like something that's going to help the whole team.
Got some stats on Kalista here. So she's been picked in 9 games, 44% win rate, so 4 out of 9. Actually been banned over half of games as well.
Well, those first couple weeks, she was banned pretty much. That's first right, ban every game.
Yeah, so I want to move on to looking back to last week. Who are the players that were real good, real bad? It was a bit of a weird week. EG was the only team to go 2-0. Dig was the only team to go 0-2. Other than that, everyone went 1-1. So I feel like fantasy scores were just kind of average across the board. Anyone stand out to you that sucked?
Yeah. that was bad. I mean, you have to say the Dig players, but outside of that, I don't think there was anybody that I can remember. I mean, my top laner was bad. Changed out Gamsu early for Dokla, and he wasn't very good.
Yeah, CLG was definitely disappointing. They scored pretty poorly, even in their wins. I'm looking at some of the scores here. Dokla had 8 and 20, Contracts 20 and 10, Palafox 17 and 8, so those were bad. Looking at other places, though, I think Han Sama was kind of bad in real life. Fantasy scores were also not great, not what you hope for. As you know, as you said, you have him in your Dynasty League. Well, the first game he scored 35, but at the end of that was such a stomp. So if you watch that game against Golden Guardians, they aced them 5-0 or maybe 4-0 at the Herald Pit early, and then I think it was a 14 or 15,000 gold lead, and then they just couldn't finish it out. They lost a couple of fights in the base. Because of that, the fantasy score was inflated. He ended with 35, which isn't bad. But then against Evil Geniuses, he scored 10, which is a bad score, but if you watch that game, did you see that flash where he made over the Rift Herald wall, the Baron wall?
Oh yeah. That was super early in the game, and the announcers were talking all about it, and then they replayed it at least once or twice. It was not good.
Yeah,
it was a huge wasted flash.
They got in a pick. Danny's Ezreal had picked Lulu. They got a kill back, and I guess Hans thought that meant the fight was turning. He flashed into melee range and just got destroyed twice because he got Zillion ulted and then died again. And that was kind of the turning point of the game. He was not good the whole week in either game. Who are some top performers you noticed? Like who are you impressed by this week?
I mean, clearly the EG players, right? They, if you go 2-0 and you just stomp everyone, you're gonna look real good. I thought C9 had really good scores. The one that I was pretty impressed with, and this is kind of, I'll get more into it a little bit later, but I was actually really impressed with Sven, going back to one of the players I'm actually cheering for now. Both of his games this weekend, although they went 1-1, he looked like a top tier support in the league, and his score showed. I think he got 63 over the course of the weekend, which is a pretty big score for
definitely
a support.
bit of a redemption after that horrendous Lulu game that he had against Flyquest. But if you remember earlier, he had the Yuumi game where he won Player of the Week. So he's definitely been, hot and cold. I think a few more reps for him there, and he'll be top of the league.
I think so too. I think they did an Afromu little side piece about Sven, and he had nothing but good things to say. Essentially, he was just on the line of support's good for older players because you kind of have a better understanding of the game, and as you get older, they say that you lose a lot of the reaction times. And so he's just a smart player, so it makes sense that he's doing good at support. I was trying to not give as much credit as everybody else was to that Yuumi game, because Yumi's you don't really have to do much champion. This weekend, he did play two that were champs that he actually had to be fairly proactive on. So it gave me a lot more confidence in his actual
that
play.
game, it was the Yuumi against the Zoe. He kept blocking the bubbles. It's like Yuumi did one useful thing, everyone goes crazy. I was really impressed with Immortals this week. Last week on here, we named them in a tier of their own because they were so bad. Couple really nice scores. Power of Evil was really good, scored 26 and then 43. Lost had 29 and then 34. They obviously beat C9 in the second game. The first game against CLG, they had total control. And then did you see the failed charm flash from Power of Evil? It feels so bad for him. Yeah, it's the second horrible play he's made this year. If you remember the play where the package timed out directly before Wing in.
I forgot that was Power of Evil.
And then this one, he charm flashes, misses, just gets turned on, and that kind of turned the whole game away from Immortals to CLG, but still way better than expected, and good scores from really the whole team. And then I think you have to call out Instinct for his pentakill. Scores of 15, which isn't great, but 48 on the pentakill game. Good stuff from him, even though nobody started him.
Yeah, he looked like you give him another week like that, and I might be changing out my ADC on my fantasy team, although I'm pretty sure at that point I'm going to be out of playoffs.
I'll move on to the player of the week. And so the LCS player of the week this week was Danny. He'd have been a good choice, but he's already won it a couple times, and you kind of expected it from him. The second highest scoring player of the week, and the player who I have dubbed as the LFL Pod Fantasy Player of the Week for Week 4, it's Fudge. Fudge had an awesome game on the Gangplank versus TSM. He scored 59.2. I believe he was 8-0-8. It's the highest individual game that we've had so far this split. And with this weekend, he actually moved from 8th in the top laner rankings to 4th. So moved up 4 spots. Do you agree?
I have to agree. Fudge was phenomenal this week. I have written here that he was nearly 20 points above second place, 19.33 to be exact. And if you take an average of all the other top laners, assuming no one played Revenge or Gamsu, he was nearly double their total point score. So, I mean, he was clearly the player of the week. I do like to be opposition to a lot of the obvious, which again, I agree with you. Danny is an even more obvious, and I appreciate that you don't just keep handing it to him, even though he's clearly, if you picked him number 1 all the way to number 4, you're very happy with him. And I talked about Sven, and I think he was awesome. And I looked it up, and man, it was that Amumu game that I just thought was super good. Again, it was with Kalista, which I hate, but Bandage tossed in, used his ultimate, and then Kalista pulls him back out on another level this past weekend. So I at least would like to give him some commendments, but yeah, it's got to be Fudge. He was
can't believe how high he shot up the rankings in 1 week. Yeah, so congrats to Fudge. He definitely earned it. He deserves it. We're going to move on to power rankings. And so I think we'll just kind of go team by team, see how they match up. I'll start with mine. In the 10th spot, I have Immortals. Even though they looked way better this week, I think if you were to put them in a tier last week, they were a tier of themselves. This year, they're in the same tier as the bottom teams, but I still think they're 10th. Who do you have 10?
I have the same. I have Immortals, and it actually, to the same point you were making, it actually was kind of difficult to put them as 10th, because they easily could have been 9th for me, but they need one more prove it game to me, and then they can start moving outside the bottom spot.
Yeah, for sure. And they should have beaten CLG. I think if they do beat CLG, they probably move up in both of our rankings. But that's just how it goes. You miss your Charm Flash, and you stay here at 10th.
That is
Number
the way
9,
it goes.
I've got TSM here. They also looked better with their new roster, but I still just don't buy it. Spica looked really good this week, actually scored really well, but I'm just not quite buying. It feels like maybe a little bit of beginner's luck, maybe a little bit of teams just disrespecting them. Who do you have 9?
I have Dig, and I just thought that they looked like they couldn't do anything, and I wouldn't have put them here until I watched the Golden Guardians game, and they weren't even able to keep up with some other lower tier teams, and so I just felt like it was between them and TSM. I'm giving away my 8th pick already, but TSM can even take a win against a much higher ranking opponent. I just couldn't put TSM below them. Dig had to be number 9 for me.
I think that's fair. Obviously, I have Dig at 8, so we're right next to each other. Dig, they faced EG in the first game, really no hope. They actually looked pretty good in that game, held a lead for a while. I think it was their Shyvana top for Gamsu that kind of went wild, but hard to carry from Shyvana top. And then they had Golden Guardians, which, like you said, did not look good in that game. Yeah, I don't know. I just think if TSM were to play Dig right now, I'd pick Dig, personally.
See, and that's the opposite for me. I would probably pick TSM if they were to go up against each other right now.
At number 7, I have Golden Guardians, and weirdly enough, I think that if you were to get power rankings from anybody, I think the most common thing would be EG1, obviously. I think the second most common would be Golden Guardians 7. I think they are very clearly better than the 3 teams below them, and very clearly worse than the 6 teams above them, which is kind of weird to have them in their own tier. I assume you agree with me here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I have Golden Guardians at 7, and I even have them exactly tiered like you do. The bottom 3 is their own tier, and then Golden Guardians, as weird as it is their own tier, and then it's everybody above them, with EG being on their own tier above that. But yeah, Golden Guardians 7. I really like
7. Golden Guardians. I wish they were doing better. I wish that Pride Stalker could play more of his signature champions, but it's just not going to happen in this meta with the durability patch and whatnot. Moving on, number 6, this is probably where we're going to disagree. I have C9 here. So I was really kind of put off by their week as a whole. They kind of crushed TSM, but I think Jensen looked really bad in that game. Had a couple real head scratchers. He had the first blood, he flashed away from the Ahri, but in a straight line, still got hit by the charm. He died randomly a couple other times, so I really wasn't impressed with C9, outside of Fudge, obviously, because he was player of the week. I'm just not sure how much I buy it. Everyone keeps... And I made this argument plenty of times as well, but the first week they had the different bot lane. They had King and Destiny in the bot lane. They went 0-3. But when I look at who they played EG and TL that week. I'm not sure they don't lose those games anyways, which would leave them at 5-4 instead of 4-5. So that's my take on C9. Who do you have 6?
I have CLG at 6. I assume that we're going to be pretty similar in that these two are probably 5 and 6, but I have CLG at 6. I really don't like putting them here because I really like their creativity in the draft. I really like their early game, but to me, they're just super reliant on the early game, and if they don't get an early lead and have Dokla on some kind of carry champ on the side, they just fall to shambles by the mid game or late game, make a mistake here or there, and whatever lead they did amass in the early game, if they did, ends up going away pretty quickly, and I just don't see that being repeatable enough for them to be outside the number 6 spot. Yeah, I struggled with
those two. I really don't buy into CLG too much either. Sitting at 5-4. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't buy it too much. What do you think about C9? Do you disagree with my take? I see you have them at 5.
Yeah, I have C9 at 5. I do think there's a lot of rust for Jensen, so it's one of those where they're 5, but they're very easily could move up to 3 or 2 if we see some better play out of them. But you're right. You have that first week where they probably would have gone 1-2, but they ended up going 0-3 because they had different bot lanes. And even with their full roster, they ended up 4-2, which, okay, it's not great.
So it'd be a lot better if it was 5-1 with no Immortals loss.
Yes, it would be much easier to rank them higher, but I do think that they're a good team. I do think that they have the easiest ability to move up the rankings, but right now it's just too hard to put them
If
higher
you
than
look at
5.
the talent in each position, I mean, they are very much capable of being a top team, and I think everyone agrees on that. It's just a matter of them putting it together. Who do you have at 4?
I have 100 Thieves at 4.
I've got
What about
Flyquest,
you?
100 Thieves at 4. That's way too low.
See, I think they actually have the opposite problem as what
Sure.
I was just saying CLG has. I think that they put too much stock in we're better at team fighting, we can win the late game. And while I think that that's probably true in Spring Split, and I actually didn't watch last year's LCS, I got back in Worlds of last year, but from what it sounds like all of last year, I don't think that they're that much separated from the rest of the group in their team fighting ability. I think between them, C9, Flyquest, TL, and EG, you put them all on fairly even ground in team fights, and it could be a coin flip any day. And so I just don't think that they're top 3
That's
caliber.
a bold take. I don't disagree that I wish they would play a little more proactive sometimes. I wish Closer could play Lee Sin still, even though it's just bad right now, because he's so good at it. But I mean, I have 100 Thieves at 2, so I believe in their talent, their ability. They crushed Team Liquid when they played them. Then again, they got crushed by C9, and so you never know with some of these games.
What are your thoughts on Flyquest? I have Flyquest at 3, so
I've
we're
got
only one
FlyQuest
apart
4.
on Flyquest.
I like FlyQuest. I thought I had them too high here. I figured most people would have them 5 below C9, but if they wouldn't have lost that last game, I believe to TSM, they would be shooting up everyone's rankings. Kind of weird. It feels like every time we hype up a team, they lose. This Flyquest is no different. But I think they work together well, and Johnson, Afromoo, and the bot lane have been super good. And so I don't have bad things to say. I'm surprised you have them higher than me, to be honest.
Yeah, they were another one of those teams that was hard for me to decide because, I mean, they have losses across the board. They have that early loss to IMT. Like, they were the only team to have lost to IMT until C9 this past weekend. And they just feel like one of those teams that plays to their opponent's level. They kept up with TL and lost because of some bad, I don't remember if it was bad shot call or bad team fight.
They got a pick, and then they ran to Baron. They had the comp with all the engage. TL had no engage, which meant TL was never going to catch them unless they were locked in a Baron pit, which they were.
Yeah, so, I would call that shot calling for sure, but I feel like they're... I feel like all of my top teams, all 3 of my top teams, I have them there for the same reason. And it's that they do the same thing as CLG, where they pick at least if not 2 winning lanes early in the game, and they actually know how to play through those lanes. For Flyquest, it's typically bot and then whatever other lane they feel like. And I don't think that's the same for TL or EG. They just kind of get to go with whatever lanes that they want to be dominant for the game. But I do think that is a good strategy for a lot of these top teams. If you can roll over a lot of the early game, then it's much easier to advance into the later game. And I think that's one of the reasons I have them above 100 Thieves, is because I feel like 100 Thieves, in comparison to Fly, is that Flyquest late game typically has even gold, if not a slight advantage, where 100 Thieves seems like they're coming back in a lot of the games. And that's where I just think it's not something that you can keep up split long. So that's honestly because I probably would have put Fly 4 behind 100 Thieves, but honestly, I do think Fly would beat 100 Thieves more than 50%
they just
of the
did
time.
On Saturday. Do you have any concerns with Team Liquid after their kind of stomp loss to EG?
I do. I think it's a lot of players. I think Jojo Pyun had an interesting take after his win on, I think, Sunday, where he said, when you're so far above the league, it's kind of boring and you're not really into the games. As much as I wish it wasn't true, I still think that's kind of true with TL, where Bwipo to me is just clearly the top laner, but he just looks like he's not having a good time. And so he's playing a lot worse than he should. Bjergsen, I think, is fine. I do think Santorin's one of the smartest junglers, but I think he's being surrounded by people right now that are just kind of phoning it in and just waiting for their ramp up into the playoffs. So I'm not worried about them because they have enough talent, but I have not been impressed.
I think Bjergsen's been really good. He's the number 2 mid laner fantasy wise. Santorin, I think, has been good in real life, even though that has not translated to fantasy. Yeah, I agree. Bwipo, Hansama, Core JJ just haven't been as good as maybe they should be. For the sake of time, we're going to keep moving. We're going a little long here. Any words on EG? I mean, they're just the best.
There's not much to say. I think they're the best in almost every role.
Totally agree.
Not much to
say. We're going to move into our match-by-match previews. We'll make our picks and maybe call out a couple of fantasy plays we like, especially from those teams where you're not really sure, are you going to start Dignitas players, Golden Guardians players, TSM players? We'll call out what we like. Saturday, first game, Dignitas versus C9, C9 minus 240. Any chance for an upset here?
I don't think so. I think it's C9.
Yeah, I
easy.
agree. Dignitas put up some good fights last week, but I don't see it. The second game, Team Liquid minus 500 versus Immortals, so huge favorites. I think Team Liquid rolls here. They've been kind of stopping all the lower teams. Immortals is a lower team. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, TL was the team that perfect gamed them the first time. I don't think it'll be a perfect game because I think IMT has leveled up since then, but I still don't think it'll be close.
Over under 4.5 kills.
I'd probably go under. Oof. I'd probably go 3 kills, and they get one of the early objectives, whether it's a Rift Herald or a first dragon or second dragon. But that's all.
3
that's about
kills
all they get.
Is brutal. Next game, TSM versus Hundred Thieves. Hundred Thieves minus 230. I think TSM puts up a fight here, but not enough. I'm picking Hundred Thieves.
See, and I think it really depends on TSM's draft. Because, again, it goes back to, I think TSM, with a bunch of rookie players, I think you play the early game and you let them kind of understand what they need to do late. So I don't think TSM wins, but I think it's a lot closer than a minus 230. Okay. So I am going 100 Thieves, but I would not be surprised if this was an upset this weekend.
Nice, okay. EG minus 350 versus CLG. You had some negative things to say about CLG. I'm assuming you're not picking an upset.
Not even close. EG, I would
you
put a lot of money
Danny
on it.
This week?
If there's a week that you shouldn't start Danny, then I don't even know. But there's no way you're not starting right. Danny in any week.
Oh, man. Last game, Golden Guardians versus Flyquest. Flyquest minus 128, so Vegas actually has this pretty close to a pick'em. I'm assuming based on the rankings we just saw, you go in Flyquest.
Yes, I will be going Flyquest. I do see that this could potentially be close. Golden Guardians has had some late game issues, so I could see it being close until 15-20 minutes whenever they're at third or fourth Drake, and then it just all falls apart and Fly ends up
I do think this one will be close, but I agree that FlyQuest will take it. Moving on to Sunday, first game is Team Liquid versus CLG. Team Liquid minus 225. What are your thoughts?
Again, I think this is Vegas has done this right. TL is a pretty big favorite here. I will be interested to see the top side. I think that could really be what makes it interesting, because you could really have both of these top laners picking something interesting between Dokla and Bwipo. But I don't think there's a surprise enough pick for CLG to overtake TL.
I think we'll see a Shyvana top in that one. I'm not sure which side.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. It. I love Shyvana. I love playing Shyvana AP jungle. I think it's interesting because of the fact that it's new, but I think it'll be boring very quickly because it seems very much like a split push forever kind of champ. So I see it's interesting now because it's new. I don't think that'll last very long.
That's fair. Game 2 is Golden Guardians versus C9. C9 minus 190 favorites. I have this one circled as an upset. I think Golden Guardians can take this one. I think C9 has been wishy-washy. I think Golden Guardians will come and take this one. What are your thoughts?
I'm pretty heavily on the C9 side. For the same reasons that I said the GG Fly game. If Golden Guardians comes out and has a decent early game, and they don't make their typical 1 or 2 big mistakes in the mid to late game, there's a very good chance that this is an upset. I do think it's a good upset alert, but I'm still would have to side with C9.
All right. Game 3, EG versus 100 Thieves. EG minus 135 favorites, which I think is absolutely criminally low. And if it was actually possible to bet these games, I would put a lot of money on EG. What do you think?
I'm with you completely. I think this is making it look like it's basically a pick 'em, that they're equal skill levels, and I just don't think that's the case at all. I think EG is superior, again, like I said earlier, in almost every lane.
I'm thinking that's a spot where you might get some values if you're playing DFS or playing on the DraftKings app. EG players might be a little discounted because of that. TSM versus Immortals is game 4. TSM's minus 130. This one I think will be really close. Interested to see what happens. Who do you like?
I actually like what Vegas picked. I would go TSM as well. I do think Immortals looked like they had life this past weekend in both their games. And TSM flipped over under their back the first game, and then the second game, they obviously won it. I do think that this will be their third week of practice as a team. I do think that they're going to start meshing better, and so I actually would pick what Vegas picked as well and go with TSM.
Nice. I think I disagree. I think I like Immortals. I was impressed with them last week. I'm wondering if, now that this question is literally put here in front of me, maybe I should have had Immortals 9th. But I think that they'll take this one. I think I really liked what they did in the preseason. I had a lot of hope for Kenvi with Power of Evil, Lost, and then Ignar for sure. So we'll see what happens, but I think they'll take this one against TSM. If you had to pick TSM, Immortals, or say Golden Guardians players for Sunday.
For Sunday specifically.
Probably TSM then, huh?
Yeah, I would go TSM players for sure, because I have Golden Guardians and Immortals both losing.
True.
And just like you're already fully aware, you want the winning teams.
That's right.
Yeah, and looking at it now, looking at the schedule, I mean, I would probably pick TSM players just to be in my fantasy lineup, because I have them. I actually think both these games are going to be close for them, but I actually have them potentially winning both, because they were my upset call out for Saturday. So
True.
That might be something that I keep in mind here in a minute when I change my fantasy roster.
Right. Last game of the weekend, it's Flyquest versus Dignitas. Flyquest minus 200. What do you think?
I think I think it's a Fly win, pretty big. I do think Dig will come out, and I think they were the ones that had the surprise. No, that was Golden Guardians with the Sejuani support.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see a way that Dig takes this from Flyquest unless they have a very poor bot lane performance early in the game. I just think Johnson, Aframu, and Takui are too good on that bot side of the map, and so I don't see how Dig can overtake them.
I think this one will be close. You did mention earlier how you think that Flyquest kind of plays to the level of their opponent. I think Dignitas in the last split and this one, as soon as I write them off, they have a nice performance, like without fail in the spring and the summer. So I actually think they will fight hard and make this close. But no, I do think Flyquest will win.
I think that's a very good point.
So we'll move on. We'll start finishing up here. We've already gone a little longer than I wanted to. We'll go with our lock of the week and our fade of the week. So my lock is Flyquest. I've got them beating Golden Guardians, beating Dignitas. I think they finish in the top 5 in all positions. I think they kind of solidify themselves as a top tier team, beating both of the teams they have on their schedule, which are lower half teams. What's your lock this week?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. I do think Fly takes a few of those top spots, but I think TL players score big this week. I do think that they're going to have a really big game because they're going to get every objective in the Immortals game.
Uh-huh.
And then I do think that against CLG, it'll be scrappy enough that they'll be able to score enough points that I don't know exactly what lanes I believe it'll be, but I think they'll be able to take at least 2 or 3 of those top spots.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So you're saying 3 TL players finished as the number 1 for their position.
Yeah, I could easily see that.
Very nice. All right, my fate of the week is that Danny will not be the overall top scorer of the week. I'm just kidding. That although
okay, good.
Yeah, he probably will be. No, my fade of the week is on CLG. They've got a brutal schedule. They play EG and then TL, so literally 1-2 in the standings. I would literally bench CLG players for TSM players and maybe even Immortals players. If you're in an 8-team league, I would really try not to play them. So I'm really fading CLG this week. What do you think?
I agree with the teams that you're saying to reach for, those TSM and Immortals players if you have CLG, but I'm definitely going Dig players bottom out this week. I don't, again, the Fly game could be closer than what I'm expecting, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in them against C9 or Fly. I could see them taking 2 big losses this week, and so I would fade on any of the Dig players this week.
So we're saying CLG and Dignitas are who you're avoiding this week if you're in an 8-team league. All right, so we're going to pretty much wrap this up, but before you go, have to ask you a couple questions. We're going to ask all of our guests. First one, who wins the split?
I think regular season, I think it's EG. It's hard, especially with their gap they already have. They already have a 2-game gap with one of those games being over TL, who I think is their biggest competition. So I think they win regular season. But surprisingly, I actually think the first seed to Worlds, which would be the team that wins the bracket,
right?
I think that'll be TL.
Really?
And I think that because EG hasn't played in enough games to be as versatile as what TL can be. So I think TL will have an advantage in versatility when it comes to the actual first-second matchup, which I think that's what it will be. And I don't think it'll be a 3-0. I sure hope it's not a 3-0. But I think it goes 4 or 5 games, and I think TL mixes it up enough that EG can't keep up. But again, I still think they're second and regular season winners.
Wow, that's bold. I like it. Okay, what 3 teams go to Worlds?
All right, I'm going to do this 2 ways super quick. I think the teams actually going are EG, TL, and either 100 Thieves or C9.
No, you don't get to say either. You have to pick one.
Okay, yeah, I'll go C9.
Okay.
I mean, if you do my ranking, I think C9 has I told you earlier, I think they have a better chance of going up the rankings. I think 100 Thieves puts too much stock in the late game. I'll go C9.
All right.
And then I think the best teams to go to Worlds from the LCS are EG, C9, and I'd probably go Flyquest. It was a toss-up between Flyquest and CLG.
Okay.
Okay. And I think I'll get a little bit more into why I think that, because I think you have a question about making it out of groups, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll get into why I think those are the 3 best in a little bit then.
Okay. Does NA make it out of groups?
I think yes. I think it's only 1 team, but I think at least one makes it out of groups. And to be fair, I don't think it's TL.
Yeah, I think you made that clear when you said they're not one of the best 3 that could go.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Okay, so I think LCS is historically not as good at macro as LCK. Is not as good at team fights as LPL. And LEC just has our number.
It's true.
So if those are your biggest competition, you got to figure out ways that you can actually beat them. And when you look at the best teams that have actually come to Worlds competitions, it was C9 in Worlds, I want to say 18. That might be wrong. It might have been even earlier than that. It might have been 16 or 17. But it was back when Licorice was on C9. He picked that Hecarim pick. It was a surprise pick. It was against the, I believe, Aatrox, and that got him all the way to semis. And they actually put up a good fight in semis, and that before losing, I think, in a 4-game series.
And then didn't everybody start playing Hecarim top after that?
Oh, yeah. By the time, I think it was halfway through groups, like they have that 2-day break or whatever.
Yeah.
In groups. Yeah, after that break, everybody started playing Hecarim. But if I remember right, C9 was already 2-1 or 3-0, so all they had to do was win one more game to get out of groups. So they had already set themselves up to get out of groups. Yeah. And then I remember that was one of the first years, so it must have been 16 or 17, but it was one of the first years I really got into Worlds, and I was super hyped for the team.
Yep.
But the second best performance, I would say, is actually TL back in the Sonateric days, if you remember those.
I remember them, and not fondly.
They were not fun games to watch, but on the world stage, I'm fine watching not fun if it means that LCS teams advance further than they typically do.
Totally agree.
And I think Doublelift even has an interview somewhere where he even said he hated playing Sonateric, but they played it. They made it all the way to finals in MSI, I think 20, and I think they went against IG in finals. Maybe that was the semifinal game. And I just remember it being a really interesting series, both semis and finals. But all that is to say is I think the 2 biggest things that NA can do is put a lot of focus into the early game. If you get a lead, macro still matters, but it matters a little bit less. And you have an edge in team fights because you already have the gold lead. And also, I think those surprise picks are really big. And I'm not saying surprise pick every game, but bring something in that you're practiced on, like that Hecarim from C9 days. I just don't see TL or 100 Thieves being those teams that bring early game or those surprise picks.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the best three would be EG, C9, and Fly, or CLG, but I honestly think Fly, because Fly has better macro, because you still need a good level of macro, but you have to be able to get there first.
Right. That point makes me think back to, and I know it wasn't NA, it was definitely LEC, but the Fervor of Battle Leona. Back before anyone played Leona. Like Leona now, it's like whatever, it's Leona, but back then nobody played Leona. And Fervor of Battle was an 80 carry rune, not a support rune. They used it for that ridiculous bot lane kill. Yeah,
that days I remember fondly of actually Ignar.
Was it
who's
Ignar?
Now LCS. Yeah, he's now LCS. So it's picks like that, and they won every game he played on that. Yep. And what was it? Ashe support to counter Zyra?
No, it was Misfortune support.
That's right. It's picks like that. Like even the top teams are coming up with these surprise picks. So because that was in the finals that was brought out.
I think it was the semifinals, but it was SKT versus Rox Tigers. So it was essentially the finals.
Yeah, the winner of that won the whole thing.
Correct.
But yeah, in that, like you said, that's part of the whole reason that I think LCS has tried so hard to out macro these teams that are clearly better. If we didn't think LCK was better, our teams would not have been going to Korea to boot camp.
Correct.
So we're already saying that whole region is better than us, so why are we trying to out macro them? We're not going to.
Yep.
So we got to find other ways to beat them. Again, that's the reason I picked the three teams I did. I don't think they're the three teams that are going, but I think those would be the ones that actually have the best chance.
All right, now speaking of Worlds, it's in North America this year. Summer Finals in Chicago. Will you make it to either?
Summer Finals, I'm not going to make it to Summer Finals, but I am planning on Worlds. I'm trying to decide between going to, I don't remember, do they just call it Round Robin now?
I call it the group stage, but I don't know if that's what it's actually called.
Well, what's the one before groups, where you have like Detonation, Focus Me, and...
Oh, yeah. 1907 Fenerbahce?
Yeah, exactly.
Play-ins, I think.
Play-ins, that's what it is. So I'm trying to decide between play-ins and groups.
Play-ins are in Mexico City.
Ooh, that's actually closer to me than New York or LA.
That's fair.
But I will probably not make it to that, and that probably solidifies that I end up going to groups in New York.
Yep, groups in New York, semifinals in Atlanta, finals in San Francisco.
Okay, yeah. I'll probably end up making it to groups. That's probably the one I was leaning towards anyways, because you get to see the most LCS games live. So it's probably the one I was planning on going to anyways, but play-ins being in Mexico City makes it so that's probably 95-5 that I end up at groups.
Well, I hope I can join you there. I haven't really decided on that yet, but definitely going to be in Summer Finals in Chicago, which I am super excited about. Shawken, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did, and thank you for having me. It was a really good time. I clearly enjoy watching LCS and talking about fantasy.
Yeah, I think the fantasy is such a cool aspect. I honestly think if you look at the growth of the NFL, I think fantasy sports is behind it, and I think that League needs to get behind this. I honestly think this could be an avenue to grow the game. There's been so much talk recently about LCS dying, and I honestly think this is an avenue that can be used to grow it.
I agree completely.
Well, thank you everyone for listening in. Really enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, follow us on Twitter. It's at LFLpod. Join our weekly challenge where you can win a $25 RP gift card. That link you can find on our Twitter as well. It will also be in the description of this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Give us a follow there if you could. We appreciate it greatly. Thank you again so much for listening in. This is Pistons Wish and Shawken signing off. Peace out.